quite a pickle. It's a twister.
You're not in a twister, Haley. You're in your lab.
Haha, right you are, Lily, but I probably had you fooled for a second. Today's episode of Facts with Haley J will focus on weather patterns.
Meteorologists often refer to repeating weather as weather patterns. Weather patterns include anything from air masses to the common thunderstorm.
What are air masses? Air masses are large bodies of air that have similar temperatures and humidity content. Once formed, air masses can move out of their source regions, bringing cold, wet, dry, or warm conditions to other parts of the world. There are four main types of air masses in North America. Maritime polar, which brings cold and wet conditions. Continental polar, which brings cold and dry conditions. Maritime tropical, which brings warm and wet conditions. And continental tropical, which brings warm and dry conditions. Air fronts are also a part of weather patterns. An air front is the area where two air masses with different temperatures and densities collide, but don't mix. When a cold air mass replaces a warm air mass, it's called a cold front. When a warm air mass replaces a cold air mass, it's called a warm front. The air behind a cold front is colder and typically drier than the air ahead of it, which is generally warm and moist. Cold fronts have a steep slope, which causes air to be forced upward along its leading edge.
Sometimes thunderstorms will line up along the edge of a cold front.
There's typically a shift in wind direction as the cold front passes, along with a change in air pressure.
What about warm fronts?
Opposite to cold fronts, the air behind a warm front is warm and moist, while the cold, dry air lies ahead of it. Warm fronts have a gentler slope than cold fronts, which often leads to a gradual rise in air. This gradual rise of air favors the development of widespread continuous precipitation along and ahead of the front. Another type of front is an occluded front. These fronts form when the cold air behind the cold front meets up with the cool air ahead of the warm front. This overtakes the warm front. Changes in the dew point, temperature, and wind direction can occur with the passage of an occluded front.
Lastly, there are stationary fronts. They're a type of front where the boundary line does not move. Often these fronts lead to significant weather, and they are commonly linked with flooding.
Speaking of flooding, I'm here with Dr. Lambert, a scientist from NOAA, here to give us a little bit more on this type of weather pattern.
Thank you, Blake. It's my pleasure. There are many types of floods, but today we're going to focus on 5 main types. Floods are some of the most common hazards in the United States.
What's the most common type of flooding?
Well, river flooding is probably the most common type of flooding. The water level rises due to excessive rain, which often makes the water surge over the riverbank. This type of flooding can occur with snow or ice, but often occurs with rain.
What can you tell us about flash flooding?
Flash flooding develops when excessive rain transpires in 6 hours or less. Often it can take as little as a few minutes to a few hours for this type of flood to take place. Usually happening in urban areas, flash flooding can cause some damage. Coastal flooding is a large issue in the southern parts of the United States, which is primarily caused by a higher tide or a heavy rainfall and onshore wind. The southern states are especially affected because of coastline development and low elevation near the coast. Storm surges and inland flooding are the final types of floods we will be discussing today. These types of floods are a byproduct of hurricanes, with storm surges often causing death and inland flooding causing extreme damage.
Super cool. Thanks for being here with us today, Dr. Lambert.
Storms! Big and loud. Storms are extreme weather, so what exactly are they? The sun heats up the Earth's surface, which causes the air near the ground to be warm. Cooler air from surrounding areas forces that warm air up, creating extreme weather. Hurricanes! Huge storms formed when vast areas of open ocean soak up the heat from the sun. The cooler air squeezes the warm air up, and the warm air carries vapor with it. So when the vapor turns back into liquid, it rains, along with releasing a lot of energy into the atmosphere. This drives the wind of the hurricane. These winds are moving so fast that the eye is created. Because hurricanes are so large, they're spun by the spin of the earth.
Hey, Haley, what happened to the cow that got caught in the tornado?
I don't know. What happened?
Utter disaster!
Tornadoes are one form of extreme weather. When air masses of different temperatures come together, they form tornadoes. The land acts like a stove, heating the air above it, but instead of being squeezed, the warm air is held down by the cold air. When conditions are right, the hot air pushes up through the cold air, creating a funnel cloud.
Hi, my name is John Todrick, and today we're going to be making a tornado in a bottle. Before we get started, let's get an okay from Mom and Dad. Mom, is it okay if I make a tornado in a bottle?
Sure, honey. Just be safe.
All right. Goggles protection. Let's do some materials. Materials are duct tape, a metal washer, 2 2-liter bottles, 1 3/4 filled and 1 not filled. Paper plate so no water will get anywhere. Let's do the steps. Step 1, put goggles on. Step 2, put the metal washer on the top of the bottle that is 3/4 filled. Get some duct tape and take the 2-liter bottle that is not filled with water and place it on top. Start taping it. Make sure it gets really tight so no water will leak out. You might need a second strip to make sure it is sturdy. Let's have some fun. Spin it around. Takes a few tries. But once you get it started, we just made ourselves a tornado in a bottle.
Lightning! Created when electrons and clouds spread out using a direct path to the ground. It heats up the air and makes it expand, causing an explosion. When lightning is produced, it also creates a sound wave, thunder. Blizzards are another form of extreme weather. A blizzard is a huge snowstorm with winds of at least 35 miles per hour and visibility less than a quarter mile. To be a blizzard, these dreadful conditions must last for a prolonged period of time, typically 3 hours or more.
The more mild side of a blizzard is a simple snowfall.
Snow is made when the temperature of clouds is below freezing. A ground blizzard is where there is no new snow falling, but the snow currently on the ground is being blown by the same conditions that a normal blizzard would abide by.
Wait, Haley, that doesn't sound very extreme.
You're absolutely right, Lily. Snowfall, sleet, hail, rain, and fog are all parts of seasonal weather. Sleet is formed when snowflakes melt and refreeze on their way to the ground. Rain is simply frozen water droplets accumulated in clouds that when they melt, fall down, or as we like to call them, rain. Hail is very different from sleet in that it forms during thunderstorms. Some thunderstorms have a very strong current of air that can hold ice against the pull of gravity. Layers are created when multiple droplets freeze onto the hail, creating a sheet of ice. Hail can vary from the size of a pea to bigger than a grapefruit. Fog is basically a cloud that touches the ground. It is formed when water vapor condenses and tiny water droplets hang in the air, which is why you can see fog. Fog can only occur when it is very humid and there is dust or some other pollution in the air.
Wow, that's a lot of seasonal weather that meteorologists have to predict.
That is a lot of weather to predict, but meteorologists at NOAA have a lot of tools to help them. Every day, the National Weather Service launches weather balloons from many different sites throughout the U.S., the Caribbean, and the Pacific to help with weather forecasting. As the balloon rises through the atmosphere, radiosonde sensors measure and transmit profiles of...
Wait, Haley, what's radiosonde?
Well, I'll tell you, Lily. A radiosonde is simply a device that communicates the measurements of air pressure, wind speed and direction, temperature, and relative humidity from the Earth's surface to about 20 miles high in the sky. This data is received by a ground tracking receiver, which transmits it to weather forecasters and other data users.
So if all these balloons are being released, then don't they pollute the atmosphere?
Actually, little Bill, once the balloon reaches a height of 100,000 feet, it pops, and the radiosonde falls to the ground. Today, satellites are primarily used for monitoring the climate and weather of the Earth. When you turn on the news and see a weather image, you're seeing data from NOAA's environmental satellites. NOAA operates 2 types of satellites for the U.S., geostationary satellites and polar orbiting satellites.
What in the world does geostationary mean?
Geostationary means that the satellite is only focusing on one part of the Earth. For the United States, geostationary satellites constantly monitor the Western Hemisphere. Polar orbiting satellites circle the Earth and provide global information.
Wow, if I'm correct, we've covered all the information connecting to weather patterns.
You're absolutely right, little Bill. Thank you for watching us today. But before we go, I'd like to welcome a very special guest, AJ on the block.
John, throw me a beat. I'm here to tell you about the weather. You see that forecast it and the stuff behind the scenes. You got air masses, fronts, floods, and storms. You got precipitation coming down in different forms. Air masses bring cold and warm air conditions away from their homes as they move positions. Air fronts are next. They have air masses colliding, but they do not mix. Long ago they decided. Instead, they now replace one another and are named by which replaces the other. Up now are storms which are very extreme, where precipitation blows and the wind will howl and scream. There's tornadoes, blizzards, thunders, and lightning, all of which are vicious and some can be frightening. We've come to seasonal weather and patterns which are milder than storms and create less hazards. We've got snowfall, hail, sleet, and rain, all of which can be an annoying pain. Each one of them starts frozen in the sky, but they all melt differently when they meet your eye. NOAA's got a unique system that lets us know the weather prediction. They launch balloons into the atmosphere, which transmits forecasts for all of us to hear. So now you know what weather there is. I give you luck and hope you ace the quiz. Word.